Welcome back to another episode of Professor Davis Says, where anybody can be a historian. I am Professor Ed Davis. Now, this series that's entitled HBCUs and their 21st century relevance and how they are needed. Alright, but before we go any further, go ahead and drop in the comments section, drop if you went to an HBCU, drop the name of your school and drop your school chant. You know, for those who attended an HBCU, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so there's a chant. Alright, so I want you to drop that chant, drop that in the comments section. Now for me, I attended Grambling State University. AKA GSU. And our chant was something like this. GS, 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 U. I thought you knew. So again, go ahead and drop that comment, drop that chant. Alright, now, what is an HBCU? I'll let that marinate for about 5 seconds for those who don't know. An HBCU is an acronym. I'm going to expound on that acronym. It's Historically Black College and or University. That's what HBCU stands for. Okay? These were institutions that were and still are around, and they've been around for over 180 years. And so you sometimes we come across people who've never heard this before. I've come across a handful of African Americans that did not know what an HBCU was. So you know, if they didn't know, our Caucasian or our European American brothers and sisters, some of them do not have an idea what an HBCU is. And so I had that experience not too long ago where I had to share with someone who saw my Grambling State University towel in my vehicle. And, you know, we were just, this person thought I attended Georgia, the University of Georgia, because, you know, Grambling, we have that, that black and gold. We have that big G, the G-men, and the G-women as well, the Tigers. And so he thought it was something else. He had no idea. He never heard of Grambling. You know, here it is, 2020, and someone's never heard of Grambling State University. So again, this is why this conversation is needed. This is why we're going to have it. And this is why we're going to learn and engage. Okay, so again, HBCUs and their 21st century relevance and how they are needed. That was the case that I just gave you right there. Because now this person is more knowledgeable about HBCUs and their relevance. Okay, so now the other thing that I want to say is that why and how they kind of go hand in hand. So in this case, why were they instituted? Why were they founded? And who supported HBCUs? Since you know what a HBCU is in terms of the acronym, let's go a little bit deeper. Okay, HBCUs were started again about 183 years ago to be exact. The first HBCU was Oscom Institute, and it changed its name to Cheney University, which is about 25 miles outside of the Philadelphia metropolitan area. And this school was established before the Civil War. Yes, African Americans were educated in the college classroom before the Civil War. And just to give you a little historical analysis to it, and to make it more relevant to what's going on today and what went on back then, there was a movie that just came out several months ago dedicated to Harriet Tubman. Well, Harriet Tubman was born around 1820, in Maryland, in Dorchester, I believe, which is about 2 hours away from Philly, where this school, Cheney University, was built for freedmen and women, African American that is. And so Harriet Tubman was a servant. She was a slave born in Maryland, which is just 2 hours to the south, which is south of the Mason-Dixon line, which is the line of demarcation, okay, between the north and the south. So let me go ahead and slow that down for you. Harriet Tubman, the most famous person for the Underground Railroad experience, a conductor, aka Black Moses, born a slave in about 1820. Now, 17 years later, you have this HBCU, the first one, Cheney University, being established outside of Philadelphia. Of course, Philly, Maryland. Geographically speaking, it's more north. It's north of the Mason-Dixon line, which is considered not the South, but Maryland's considered the South. So slavery was prevalent. It was a pro-slavery state at that time. So that just kind of gives you some historical backdrop too when Cheyney University was established. It's important that we have that historical marker. Also, James Van Buren had just been elected president March of 1837. And so there's another historical reference around that time as well. When he was president, you know, there's a lot of things that went through as it relates to slavery. And of course, if you saw the movie Amistad, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so again, these are one of the reasons why HBCUs are still relevant today, and also what happened back 180 years ago. All right. Also, another point about these institutions and why they were founded, why were they supported. Okay, a number of Caucasians, a number of European Americans, all right, wanted to see African Americans not in shambles, not in shackles, and not be considered slaves per se, you know. So this train of thought was at both the North and both the South. And so these Caucasians, these European Americans, these abolitionists, if you will, they wanted to abolish physical chattel slavery, all right. They wanted to, free African Americans, and this is one of the methods to do that, was to have institutions that taught African Americans a number of things, but primarily industrial jobs, agricultural jobs, other service jobs. These are all, of course, general studies type jobs through education. All right, when you hear names like A&M, that's agricultural and mechanical, okay, or AT, or North Carolina A&T, agricultural and technological. Okay, so again, you had these schools that were built 180 years plus ago. You have to think about where these names came from. Several of them went through name changes, and of course, a lot of them, and I don't want to go too far ahead of the game, these establishments were educational institutions, all right, and some of them were started by Caucasians, African Americans, and even in some cases, yes, people from different countries, even like India, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, many people don't know, and that's why we're changing the narrative when it comes to HBCUs and their relevance. It's important that we know all sides, if not most of the sides of angles, when you're talking about African American education, African American educators, or people who supported the idea of former slaves being educated. It wasn't that popular here in the South, but of course the minds were changed in the North, and we'll talk further about that once we have our another episode coming up. So just want to kind of go ahead and recap what you know now. HBCUs stands for an acronym that means Historically Black College and or University. The first one was established in 1837 right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, called Cheyney University. Okay, and of course, just 2 hours south of that, we had Harriet. Of course, we all know the most famous Underground Railroad conductor. She was born in 1820, and of course, she fled to the north. Probably had to pass through Cheyney or along the way to go to the north. All right. So there's a lot of schools that have these connections, whether it's Wilberforce in Ohio or Tuskegee in Alabama. They all have that connection, and we will talk about that moving forward. Okay. So again, I am Ed Davis. Make sure that you give the thumbs up. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel, and also be sure to stay tuned next time for another episode. All right. And remember, Professor Davis says,